With the release of the Perils of Baking and Halloween Forever, PS Vita fans have two old-school platformers to play. I decided to review them together since there are some areas of similarity that I would have repeated if I were doing two separate reviews, and also there are some differences in the two games that make for an interesting contrast. It's worth noting though that I had fun with both games and would recommend both of them if you're a fan of the genre. I'll start with the Perils of Baking. This game has you play as a baker that goes on a quest through 40 levels full of evil sugar snacks to defeat his evil brother. The story was not a big selling point of the game, and that's the case in Halloween Forever too. I don't know if I missed it when I was starting the game, but I didn't see any intro or explanation of the story. I only realized the protagonist had an evil brother when I first encountered him on stage 10. This wasn't a big deal though, to be honest, as the gameplay and levels were the biggest selling point of the game. You have the usual controls of a 2D platformer: walk, run, and jump. The jump felt a bit too floaty to me, but you get used to it as you play. You need to progress through each level by jumping between platforms and stomping on bad guys. You gain health as you collect 50 pieces of food. This doesn't take as long as it may sound, as there's a lot of food per level, and every time you kill an enemy you get more food. You gain a heart for each 50 pieces of food, and each heart lets you take one bit of damage. You can collect a maximum of 5 hearts, and when you've collected enough food for 4 hearts, you can start throwing cooking utensils at enemies. Through each level there are 4 letters to collect that spell the word bake, and collecting them all automatically gives you 5 hearts. There are 40 levels to play through across 4 worlds, and there are some secret levels to unlock too. Most levels follow the standard platforming style, where you need to travel right to get to the end of the level, but there are some underwater levels, levels where you float around on a balloon, and levels where you're driving a minecart and need to jump the cart to avoid holes in the ground and to collect the food and letters. I found the variety of levels were fun and interesting. Looking for the letters and secret areas added longevity to the game, beyond just completing each level. I found myself going back through the levels looking for collectibles. I wasn't actually able to find all the secret areas, they were that well hidden. Or I'm just rubbish, it could be either really. The game itself is not too difficult, especially early on. Some areas can be tricky, especially when you don't have 4 hearts, so you can't throw projectiles at enemies. I did think occasionally that the game may be better if that ability was not present at all, because a lot of times I'll just stand back and throw a load of projectiles and take out the bad guys with very little effort. I normally hate underwater levels, but they weren't too bad in this game. They were still the weakest levels in the game, but I've played way worse underwater levels. The penalty for losing all your hearts is to start the level again with 1 heart, but if you get the popcorn machine in the middle of the level, you start again from that checkpoint. The graphics and sounds were retro, as you can tell. I wasn't a fan of the art style or music personally, but I got used to it quickly and didn't mind it too much. The levels were quite random at times, from a forest setting, to a technology theme, which is basically platforms with 1s and 0s all over it, to the castles where your evil brother resides. It didn't feel like there was much consistency really, linking levels together in terms of style, but again, I ended up just looking past that and focusing on the gameplay. Overall, I enjoyed the Perils of Baking. I wasn't a fan of the jump and movement at first, but got used to it, and by the time I was halfway through the first world, I was enjoying the game. You select levels on an overworld map, kind of like Super Mario World, and you can replay completed levels. It's not a super long game. It'll probably take you around 2 to 3 hours to beat, which is actually pretty similar to Halloween Forever. Halloween Forever has you play as a pumpkin man that needs to investigate the appearance of monsters. You run, jump and spit objects at enemies in order to progress to the end of each of the 5 levels. You start the game with 3 lives, and for each life you have 5 hearts. Similar to the Perils of Baking, you lose a heart when you take damage. When you lose all your hearts, you start at the beginning of the level, or at the last checkpoint if you beat the mid-level boss. If you lose all your lives, you have to play the whole game from the beginning again. The first time I lost all my lives and realized I couldn't start again from the level I was on, I was a bit surprised. There aren't many games that still use that mechanic these days, and it made me play quite cautiously at times, because the cost of dying is so severe. This was a contrast to the Perils of Baking, where I wasn't too worried about dying, as I knew that the worst that could happen was that I'd start from the beginning of the level again, and it was easy to collect more hearts in the Perils of Baking. In Halloween Forever, there's 1 extra life to find on each level, and it's pretty well hidden, so you have to know the secret passages and routes in order to find it. Halloween Forever also has characters that you unlock by finding them in the levels. Some of them make the game significantly easier, especially with boss battles. The bosses were all very different. Some were pretty tricky at first, but once I learned their movements and attacks, they were all manageable. That's the same with the levels themselves. Some areas could be difficult, but once you learnt the areas and the enemies, they become very straightforward. My main aim when playing was to reach the boss with all my hearts, and a lot of times it was easier to take out enemies at a distance, or just avoid them altogether. I did get frustrated at times when I landed on a pit of spikes, which I could not see. These deaths felt unfair, but after a few playthroughs, I learned the levels enough to avoid that happening. I had a good feeling of satisfaction getting through levels unscathed, because I knew them so well, but I think that's also a negative for the game. I finished it on my 7th attempt. All in all, I probably played for around 2 hours. Within those 2 hours, I had unlocked 3 characters and got through the game with one of the new characters. I could keep playing to unlock the secret ending and all the playable characters, but I don't really feel much need to do that. The levels are so short that I've already found all the secret routes, and I know how to beat all the enemies, that I don't really want to play it again. Now, having said that, I really enjoyed my time with Halloween Forever. Dying made me want to try again, and beat each boss or level, and I ended up starting and finishing the game in the same day. With 40 levels, the Perils of Baking felt like it had a lot more content, and my time was spent playing new levels, whereas Halloween Forever was spent playing and replaying levels. I didn't replay that many levels on the Perils of Baking, however it didn't grab me as much as Halloween Forever, and I did take breaks from the game. I liked the graphics and style of Halloween Forever. The enemies and environments and bosses all worked really well together. I enjoyed my time with Halloween Forever. It got its hooks in me and left me wanting more, but I wanted new content. I just didn't feel I wanted to replay the same levels again, because by the time you do beat the game, it felt pretty easy since you know and understand the levels so well by that point. I want to also point out that there's a glitch with Halloween Forever, where the game crashes after beating the last boss. The developer has said that it will be patched soon, so it may already be sorted out by the time you watch this video. If you're a fan of old school platformers like me, I'd recommend both of these games. They're both fun and play well. I find it hard to recommend one over the other. There are elements of the Perils of Baking that I preferred over Halloween Forever, and vice versa. I had more fun with Halloween Forever and preferred the graphics and style, but I feel like I could continue playing the Perils of Baking and find all the secrets without getting bored. However, it's also worth noting, the Perils of Baking does cost double Halloween Forever, and the overall playtime is not that different between the two. So I won't recommend one game over the other, but I'd love to hear your views if you played either or both of these games. Leave a comment below, and as always, thanks for watching.